This work session of the Board of Education of the Cleveland Municipal School District will come to order. Mr. Stockdale, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Ellicott?
Here.
Mr. Billups?
Here.
Mr. Briggs?
Here.
Ms. Jones? Here. Pastor Jones? Mrs. LeBron? Mrs. Peak?
Here.
Dr. Sridhar? Mrs. Welchow?
Here.
There are 6 members present.
Thank you. My understanding is Dr. Sridhar is on his way. I'd ask everyone who wishes to rise and participate in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Quick point of information for board members. I think everyone's been briefed so far, but we do have a new system for raising your hand to be recognized for a question or comment. You'll see on your screen that there is a tab open that says CMSD Board Light Control, has a raise hand and a lower hand button. Raise hand will light up your light like so. We'll save these for when we have a game show night, but for tonight, they will be very helpful for the board meeting. All right, at this work session, the board will continue the practice of placing a number of resolutions on a consent agenda, which the board will vote on to adopt all of them in a single vote. This evening's work session consent agenda includes the minutes of the last 2 board meetings, Resolution 4.01, approving the general fund 4-year forecast, which the board discussed at our September 23rd board business meeting. The chair will now entertain a motion to approve this work session's consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Stockdale, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Ellicott?
Yes.
Mr. Briggs? I'm sorry, Mr. Billups?
Yes.
Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Ms. Jones? Mrs. Peak?
Yes.
Mrs. Welchow? Motion passes with 6 votes.
Thank you, Mr. Stockdale. This evening's board meeting agenda also includes an additional 8 resolutions in the areas of finance, operations, academics, excellence, and culture, which the board will vote on as part of its consent agenda for our October 28th board business meeting. The board will now hold its monthly monitoring of goals and guardrails. Dr. Morgan?
Thank you, Chair Ellicott. Well, I'm excited to bring together our first of our goals, because I believe the 2 monitoring sessions we've had so far have been our guardrails. So now we're into one of 3 of our goals, and this is specifically thinking about what students know and are able to do. And now we're in the year where we're actually getting real-time data. So we'll take a little bit of a reflective look back on last school year, but really talk about our progress moving forward. So tonight's goal is on math proficiency. Of course, math proficiency focused on Algebra 1. We have 2 interim goals. One of those measures being, one of the CEO measures being that we would have proficiency in Algebra 1, so looking at students who are currently in Algebra 1, seeing their proficiency rates and ensuring that they're on track. And then we have another goal that's specifically looking at the end of our 5-year period of goals, who are the students who will be taking Algebra 1. So we're specifically looking at the cohort of 5th graders now, who will be in 9th grade in spring of 2030, but then also looking at some other cohorts that may potentially be eligible to take algebra. I'll be presenting, I have my amazing team here to answer any questions and also fill in any of the gaps. We have Dr. Selena Florence, our Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Anna Turner, who's our Deputy Chief of Teaching and Learning, and then also Ms. Erin Frew, who is our Deputy Chief of Schools, and then Jessica Wiseman, who's our Executive Director of Special Education. So really excited to have our academics team, and also Dr. D'Amico always on deck there, who is our Executive Director of Research Evaluation and Accountability. All right, we want to start with just a moment of celebration. Last month, our state report card was released, and over the course of the next several board meetings, we'll be diving into just look at some of the things that went well in our report card, but also some things that we have to focus on. This is the year of leveling up, but very proud of our educators and our scholars to see the proficiency gains that took place across every tested subject area. Tonight we'll be focusing specifically on our math, in terms of our math progress. And last year, our greatest progress, or some of our greatest progress, was in math. We saw 12.3 percentage gains in Algebra 1, 8 percentage gains in geometry, almost 5% point percentage gains in K-8 math, and then our math overall, when you look at all of those cohorts, was 6.2. That is significant gains. That doesn't happen just by happenstance or magic. There is a lot of hard work happening in our classrooms, so shout out to our educators and our teachers, and then our school leaders who have been leading this work, our school leaders at the central office, but then most important, our scholars who've been meeting the demand of the complex tasks we've been putting in front of them in math. If you note here, we have now exceeded the pre-pandemic proficiency in Algebra 1. So this is, we often hear about what the pandemic has done to our scholars, and now we've exceeded where we were pre-pandemic in Algebra 1. We still have other areas we need to improve. We also exceeded pre-pandemic proficiency in high school English language arts as well as U.S. government. More specifically, as you think about the overall proficiency growth in the district over the course of over last school year, combined with all the assessments that were taken, our proficiency growth is outpacing where we were for the previous 2 years, even from last year when we achieved a 3-star rating. And so very proud of this progress. We want to keep it going. Our board goals are helping us stay focused on these areas and making sure that we, when we see areas that need attention, we can focus on it. And so tonight is a perfect time. We're almost at the end of Q1, so for our families, please make sure you are checking your child's grade book. I was meeting with the Parent Advisory Council today, and there was a parent who had her child's grade book, and she was showing me the grades. She was also asking, where are the assignments? So we also want to make sure that the grade books are in there, that their assignments are there. But parents, check it out. I believe Friday is the last day of the quarter, and we want to ensure that our scholars are on track and meeting everything that needs to happen in math and in all the subjects. One other thing I want to note before I move on, one of the things that our academics team has been working hard on is ensuring that there is high quality curricula in every single classroom across our schools that is standardized. And in math, they vetted a few high quality curricula that we're using across our schools, but in Algebra 1 and geometry, we've had a single curriculum. And I know in ELA there was a single curriculum, but when you look at the gains that are taking place in both Algebra 1 and geometry, on top of some of the things we're going to dive into tonight that the team has been doing, really making sure that there's a coherent model that the team can support has been one of the attributes that I know the team attributes to the success from last year. Really quickly, just one other thing on two other slides on last year, and I've been sharing this for a while. As anticipated, we knew the report card would be changing this year, so a new measure is added, college, career, workforce, and military readiness. We shared about this in our first monitoring session of Guardrail 2, which is CEO Measure 5. Sometimes they say Guardrail 5, but it's Guardrail 2, CEO Measure 5, really looking at our college and career readiness. And so as we present on our college readiness goal in the coming months, as well as going back to that Guardrail 2, we'll be talking more about that college, career, workforce, and military readiness. As anticipated, we have went down by a half a star because as a district, we've historically not done as strong in this area. Right now, for the cohort that was recently measured on this last report card, which was the class of 2024, we have a little bit over 35%. If you round that up, 36% of our scholars that were proficient on that measure. So we have a lot of work to do. You'll be hearing more about our measures with this. As we talk about building brighter futures, this is an area that will help address this, and it's also aligned to our board goals. Okay, now into our measures. I wanted to do that reflecting on last year, but into this year. So if you look at board goal 2 around math proficiency, the goal states the percentage of first-time test takers who are proficient in Algebra 1 will increase from 26% in August 2024, that was last fall, to 50% in August 2030. One of the things we mentioned is that when we went and got feedback on this goal, some thought 50% would be too ambitious. And already you see from the gains that we had in Algebra 1 last year of 12.3 percentage points, we're more than halfway to the distance of the goal. And so if we continue continue with that progress, one, we may need to adjust the goal, but two, it just shows that when we set the bar high for our scholars, they meet it. And so that's just a charge for all of us to level up for our scholars and not count them out. Now, our interim goals are our CEO measures under each of these. As I mentioned before, we're looking specifically at the percent of those students who are taking Algebra 1 for the first time that are predicted to be proficient as measured by the Winter NWEA MAP assessment. That's our benchmark assessment. From the baseline of last year when they took it, of 24.3 to 26.9 in Winter 2026. So what we're looking at today is actually our fall data, so we're not actually at the point of looking at what will be measured on this interim goal, but we are looking to see if we're on track. Interim goal 2 is focused on the percent of the students from the 2033 graduating cohort. These are the students who will be taking Algebra 1 for the first time. Some of them may have already taken it in 8th grade, but there are current 5th graders, and so we're looking at their winter iReady assessment. iReady is a new assessment that we're using to measure proficiency in math in our elementary grades. So we're looking at that baseline of last year that was 33.5% to go to 38% in winter 2026. We're not at winter 2026 yet. That will be in a few months, but we want to see if we're on track for that. And I'll talk a little bit more about this assessment and some of the things we're seeing in the data. All right, so if you look at this graph here, these are just looking at algebra proficiency rates over time. Our interim measure, or CEO measure 1, are different cohorts of students. So I want to be very clear. These are not the same students that we're looking at over time, but we are just seeing if the strategies that we're doing in Algebra 1 to support our 9th graders year over year are improving. There are some caveats because every cohort is different. So sometimes when you're looking at year-to-year growth, you do want to grow. We expect to grow every year, but they're different students. So you have some cohorts that come in and they're stronger, and you have some cohorts that come in a little bit further behind. And so when we're looking at different cohorts, we're actually just really looking at the progression to see, are we on track? And also, are the strategies that we're using working? So from this data, if you just look at the fall set of charts, because this is comparing fall 2023, which was my first year as CEO, last school year, fall 2024, and then now where we are in fall 2025. And as you can see, there's a progression of growth from fall to fall for our 9th graders. And if we follow the same trend, the interim goal is actually looking at winter to see where we go in the winter. We have not taken the test yet for winter 2026, but if we follow the same progression, we are on track. Now, we'll have to take that assessment to see where we land, but if we were looking at just a statistical analysis of this, we are on track. We're seeing growth from fall to fall. This is actually the same assessment. Every year, what we use for the benchmark assessment for Algebra 1 and for our high school students is the NWEA assessment. This also is statistically relevant when you think about predicting students who will be proficient on the OST assessment. So we are on track to meet this goal. We have roughly right now, I'm looking at that, and I know I have it down here. We have about 24.35% of students who are proficient now. What that test is saying, if today was the day that students were taking that OST test, we would have about 24.3% of our students proficient on the goal. And in what you see from last year, from the fall to winter, there was growth. And so if we see that same growth, we're hoping to realize that. One other thing I would note here, I know you're looking at the predicted proficiency of where we were. This is based on benchmark assessments. Our students showed up and showed out last year. So even this predicted proficiency from last year of winter, where winter 2025, our students around Algebra 1 ended around 24 point, I believe that may be about 3. I believe we ended at about 39% proficiency for Algebra 1 with the growth. Is that correct, Dr. Turner? Yep, roughly around there. So, our predictive rates Usually it stays within a margin of, a couple of points, but we even saw even more growth. So know that even when we're looking at these assessments, there can be even more growth in our scholars if we do measures. On the flip side, sometimes you see proficiency growth, and if measures are not taken into account, or sometimes if the assessment is even harder at that time, it can go backwards. So it's a predictive measure. It's not an absolute or a guarantee. What we see here are a few different things. I know this chart can be a little confusing, but this looks at the different years, fall and winter, fall 24, and that's school year 24, which was the 23-24 school year, winter 24, which was just, winter 23-24 school year, fall 25, which was last year 24-25, and winter 24-25, and currently where we are in 26. One of the things you've heard us talk about, you've heard Dr. Florence talk about it, we've been focusing really hard on getting the number of students to take the test. If they sit for the test, we can have a better understanding of where they will be and if they're proficient or off track, proficient or on track or off track. I will name for this fall, for our Algebra 1 test takers, we had a higher number of untested students. Not the highest number, as you can see in that first fall, that was the highest number, but we had a higher number of untested. If you look at our two high school networks, Network 1 and Network 2, we saw the biggest gap in Network 2. So our high schools that are in Network 2, there were not a lot tested, and so I know that the academics team is putting measures in place to really work with our school leaders to ensure students are taking the test. But then also we're focusing hard on attendance and chronic absenteeism. That was another area on our report card that we need to work on. And if students aren't in school, they can't take the test. So this is something that's alarming for me in terms of the untested rate, but I know the team is already hard at work, and we're looking to see that we can close that gap in the winter. Another thing I want to note here, when we looked at our data last year on the OST assessment, we had gains in all of our testing areas, but we did see two groups that we want to really focus on, and I'm glad that we have Jessica Wiseman here, who's our Executive Director of Special Education, because when we think about our students with disabilities, as well as our English language arts, not English language arts, our English language learners, those were students where there were gaps. And as we look at even our fall tests that we just took in Algebra 1, the proficiency rates of students who are English language learning, as well as students with disability, is lower than what the proficiency rate is of non-ELLs and non-students with disabilities. So some work we have to do there. We just had a special education audit from the Council of Great City Schools, because I know the academics team is really working to figure out how do we support our students better, focusing both on Tier 1 instruction, and for those on the board or those who are listening who are not familiar with Tier 1 instruction is when the teacher teaches it to all students, and that's what happens in the classroom when teacher teaches the content to all students. You want to ensure that they get it. But students have different needs, and so we also must focus on students with Tier 2. Those are the students who say, I may have gotten it, but I need some extra supports. And then our Tier 3 students who need intensive intervention beyond what is taught in the general curriculum. So we're focusing on that, and we're working on some measures. We got some great feedback from our colleagues at the Council of Great City Schools, and we're looking to dive into that to improve this as well. All right, so this next measure, this is CEO Measure 2. This is looking at a cohort. So if you're looking at this line, these are the same students. So these are the exact same students from where they were in third grade, which were, you're seeing their third grade in fall of 23-24, their third grade in the winter of 23-24, their OST, like what they actually did when they took it in the spring in third grade, their fourth grade year in terms of fall 24-25, winter when they were in fourth grade in 24-25, and what they just did this past spring when they were in fourth grade. Now they're in fifth grade, and they just took the iReady assessment, and these are the students who will be taking ninth grade algebra in 2030, which is the year of the culminating year for our board goals. And what we see is a massive drop here. So it's all the way to 17.63%. And I'll talk about some of the things that we're seeing and why we are off track. So this is a goal we are off track, and thank goodness for our board goals. I know when I was reviewing this with some of our board members, it's like, what if we didn't have very specific targeted board goals? This could be a group that goes under our radar, and we wouldn't even know that there was this massive drop. I mean, there would be people that would know, our teachers teachers. I'm sure our academics team would know. But we want to lift this to the community because this is a group we want to focus on. These are who will be graduating, our seniors, in 2033. That feels like a far way off, but every day matters, and proficiency matters along the way. So a few things to note. We typically do see a drop in our proficiency rates from 4th to 5th grade. The standards are changing a bit. Students are starting to get into some pre-algebra content in those middle grades, so we do see a drop. This, though, is the second largest drop that we've seen in over a 5-year span of where we're seeing, drops of greater than 10 points. And so this is something we're looking at, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we're seeing. Like what we saw in the other grades, this is looking at those different bands. And if you're looking at the bottom row, that's the data we just looked at where there were 17% of students' proficiency. So the green and the light blue tabs, those are showing the students at a proficiency. So that 13% plus probably another 4%, those are the students that are proficient. That blue, actually the lighter blue and actually the dark blue, those are like accelerated and advanced. Those are students who are, high flying, enrichment, some of our gifted students probably, and then that green band is showing that they're proficient. If you are yellow or orange, and also blue, because those are untested, we have a majority of students who are not proficient in this measure. Now, if you see here, we still had some students that were untested, but our elementaries did a pretty good job. Only 3% of students were untested. So we would love to get more students that are taking the test, but we had the majority of students sit for this test. A few things that we noted when looking at this. Our proficiency rates, overall, we're fairly even across our networks. You can see that network 1 and 2 had slightly higher proficiency rates than networks 3 and 4. Network 4 had the smallest drop in proficiency from last fall to this fall, from when they were 4th grade to 5th grade. But I will note that network 4, and I'm looking at Dr. Florence in this, those are a lot of our schools that need a lot more academic support. So some of those schools are not as highly rated on the report card measure. So it was probably not as big of a drop because there were probably not as many students to be proficient to begin with. So some work to do there, but we saw this consistently across networks. That's the headline there. And once again, another area where we have to really focus on our groups that need some level of differentiation, our English language learners, and as well as our students with disabilities. There is a gap between proficiency rates in those groups versus students who are non-English language learners and non-students with disability. Now, I want to point out another cohort. I'm going to get back to the 5th grade data, because if you're looking at it, you're like, okay, what happened? So we're going to go back to it and talk a little bit about some of the things we're seeing. But I want to talk about 4th grade, because the reason why I had our team pull 4th grade, technically 4th grade is not part of the interim CEO measure or the CEO measure that we have here. But it is a big part of a student group that could be taking Algebra 1 in 2030. You have heard me say over and over again that Algebra 1, access to Algebra 1 in 8th grade can be a gatekeeper. When students have access to Algebra 1 in 8th grade, our data shows that they're more likely to be proficient. Last year on the OST test, the students who took Algebra 1 in 8th grade showed 76% proficiency, but they only represented 3% of the test takers, only 3%. Currently, right now, only 7 of 61 elementary schools offer Algebra 1, and 70 students are enrolled in Algebra 1 out of 2,319 8th graders. So it does show, and there was a teacher, and I wanted her name here, and if I cannot get it before the end of the meeting, I promise I will shout it out at the next board meeting. But each year our teachers union does a almost like a problem of practice demonstration event that happens in the spring. And both Chair Ellicott and I had the opportunity to visit this past spring, and hers was specifically focused on access to Algebra 1 in 8th grade and really looking at our gifted students. And her research was pretty incredible. She was also seeing some of the things we were seeing before even our data became official, that when students are taking Algebra 1 early and often, there are increases. What's the school name that she's at least from? I'll give her a shout. Was it Gallagher? Orchard, okay. Well, I promise we'll get the name. It was phenomenal work, and I know both myself as well as Chair Ellicott was really impressed with her research. But it just shows that there's a strategy, that we have an opportunity now through Building Brighter Futures and some of the work that we're doing to offer Algebra 1 to more students in 8th grade. So this group, this 2034 cohort that are current 4th graders, there may be more students taking Algebra 1 represented in our 2030 data. Okay, after that mouthful, let's look at what we see in this data. These are the same groups of students looking at both their 3rd grade, fall, winter, and OST. So you see a progression. They grew last year. And then you see where they are in the fall. So a little bit of a dip. You know, I don't know if there's an alarm here. There's, they're in a new grade level. The dips are, actually, if you're looking at fall to fall, they actually grew. So this cohort grew. What our data shows is that bigger drop-off is between 4th and 5th grade. So, of course, these are 4th graders now. And they are also taking the iReady for the first time. So this is also another group of students taking the test, but showing that demonstrated proficiency. And this, as I mentioned before, this data represents potential like 714 students that could be taking Algebra 1 in that 2030 cohort. Few things before I go into strategies for improvement. I want to go back to our 5th grade data. So, and I'll talk a little bit about this when we're doing our analysis. Let's talk about the 2 sets of tests. So if you're looking at this cohort, the 5th grade cohort right now, up until this year, they were taking the NWEA, and this year we're taking iReady. Now, I don't want to overdial on this because both are statistically significant research-based tests. So we don't want to get into, which test actually is better or not. As you saw, we just saw 2 cohorts, both that took iReady, one that's predicted to be a little bit ahead, the other one that's not. So, but it is something to note. It is a new assessment. It does take time. And it is an adaptive test. So the more we take it, the more our teachers get used to it, and our teachers are getting used to the iReady portal, the better we'll get at it. But both are predicted to be proficient. So we are looking at this 17 number, and we're concerned and we're focused on it. We're not throwing it out. But I did want to note that there is a new test. The other thing I want to note on this data for this cohort is in both iReady and NWEA, students take the test based on the standards for that year, the 5th grade standards for that year. And sometimes demonstrated through a time in the year, they will pick a certain amount of questions that maybe the teachers would have hit. One of the things we found was that this test was heavy on fractions, of which in our pacing guide, and I'm looking over our academics team, if it's been hit, it's just now getting hit, not necessarily there yet. Yeah, so what Dr. Turner was just sharing there, out of the 4 curricula that we use, only 1 has really started hitting on fractions. So, and I think there were 17 questions on this iReady that was about there, or was a good majority? 35. Yeah, so 35% of the questions on the test hit fractions, and only 8 of the schools actually have started to hit on fractions. So one of the things we noticed, we haven't really got to the content area. That's one of the things we start to do an analysis on. But in a moment, you're going to see we have a focus. As a group, we have to focus on. Just sharing those things that we did do in an early analysis, and I know the team is hard at work really thinking about this group. All right, so let's go into what are working strategies for improvement, and then we're going to talk about some things that we've noticed. So as you've been hearing us talk about for a few years now, implementation of high quality curriculum and high quality instructional materials is really important. I know our academics team has worked hard to put scope and sequences in our system. So those are pacing guides that are on our now curriculum portal. There's a curriculum and instruction newsletter that goes out to all teachers, which if you access that portal, it has information like the pacing guides there. The curriculum is also linked there. I know that several of the program managers on our teaching and learning team are there with strategies for improvement. I think some videos have been uploaded, but I know if they haven't, there is the ability for us to upload videos, share different practices, both from the central office and school leader perspective, but also from teachers, sharing best practices across the classroom. So we have work to do to really continue to really engage and vet those common set of materials and support our teachers. One of the things we noticed, and we noticed this also with ELA, but today's not the day for us to focus on ELA. We'll be doing that on the 28th. But our teachers are teaching the text, and that's a huge celebration to our teachers. When we go in and walk into the classrooms, they're teaching the text. But teaching the text alone does not get students to higher levels of proficiency. They need to be engaged in cognitively demanding mathematical tasks. Our students need to be engaged in actually doing all parts of the curriculum and not chunked out parts, which sometimes, as a teacher in the classroom, we realize sometimes when planning materials that there are some aspects of the text or the materials that may be easier for our students, but they're designed to scaffold to really engage students in higher level thinking. And if we're not taking our students to that higher level, they won't reach it. And we do have data that shows in our walkthroughs that we have work to do as educators. And those aren't just teachers in the class, but the work we do to support our educators to ensure we're getting to that higher cognitive demand. And then also data-driven instructional protocols. What that is we have to be obsessed about the data. We have to look at it and see what's happening with our students. So the fact that we're seeing that there are 17% of students proficient, like this is not just a wake-up call to everyone in our schools, but to everyone here. Like these are students. Their faces behind this. What are we doing for them? Analyzing that data and saying, how are we adjusting instruction? What must we do? What are the works we need to do? What professional development we need to do? And so when we think about our teacher-based teams, when we think about the professional development, I know some of that sounds like, oh, that's not important. No, this is the work. And if we're not doing it, we're leaving kids behind. So I just know that the academics team has been working really hard on this. All right, I know there's a lot of words here. Some of this I've already covered. Some things that are working, as I mentioned, teachers are using the curriculum that is working. The creation of now a math walkthrough tool. I know that there was already an ELA walkthrough tool last year, and our teaching and learning team has now worked to have a math tool and worked really closely with our with Dr. D'Amico's team to really make sure that the way we're collecting data is consistent and there are trends that we can make across the board aligned to our curriculum. As I mentioned before, we need to build the capacity of our school leaders and our principals. Principals are the instructional leader in their building. We don't actually have as many touch points with teachers. We have PD in the beginning of the year, and I know throughout the year there are different types of PDs that are offered, but we can't hit every teacher all at once. Principals have time with their teachers, now other than just seeing them every day, but they have 50 minutes every week. And how do we leverage that time in the best way possible to ensure that we're progressing the work? And so we know our principals need support, and there's been a lot of work that the academics team and schools team has done to make sure that these materials are turnkey, so that when we're doing principal professional development, they could just turn it around and give it to their teachers. We already talked about getting more students to take Algebra 1 in 8th grade is also something we're looking at to figure out how we can get more students proficient. It says what is not working, but I would say like what needs attention. I already mentioned iReady. It's not that it's not working. The assessment is here. It's a great assessment. There are districts that have had great gains with it. We have had great gains in other grade levels, but it is knowing it is a new tool, and we have to continue to work with it, learn from it, and see how we can better support. And then really asking these questions about why do gaps exist between some of our most vulnerable populations, thinking about our students with disabilities as well as our English language learners. And it goes back to what I shared about the different tiers of curricula and the way we're supporting students through that, with a real strong emphasis on MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. I know when we use a lot of acronyms, and so where I can, I want to make sure I can explain that. But that's really just thinking about those different tiers of instruction along the way. So what supports and adult behaviors will change the response of this data? As I mentioned, the analysis that we're doing in those meetings, really thinking about the curriculum, thinking about the support that we give to all students, but really specifically looking at those student groups. One of the things I know Dr. Florence mentioned when we got our OST data back, we said we can do more work to actually look at our specific groups and our subgroups. And I know this year they're studying that data as well. And if we're doing that along along the way, we can think about what supports need to be put in place. A deeper analysis of this 5th grade cohort with the school leaders and also just in general, just figuring out what happened with this group. And the implementation of bi-monthly Algebra 1 and 8th grade math teacher cohorts to do a deep dive into the curriculum, unit assessment, and teacher best practice. And some things we need to speed up the progress. We do need to look at this 5th grade cohort. I mean, we have an entire interim measure on this, and so it's really important that we dive in, we look into it, and we'll have the luxury that over the next several years to look at this cohort and study this cohort and find out what's going on with them, how they're improving, the support that they need. And so shout out again to our board goals for being so focused. We have an entire district to focus in on, but it's always great when we can really get specific and think about how do we move the needle through a few cohort groups. Some best practices that we want to replicate. So when I think about the progress from last year, there were some best practices that we saw that we are looking about codifying and figuring out how to replicate. So one, really leveraging, we have 3.5-star plus schools that have things that are working and really figuring out how do we replicate those best practices, share those best practices for teachers. And those schools come in all types. There are schools, shout out to A.B. Hart, which I think now is a 3.5-star school on the southeast side of the city. So they are not just our specialty schools, they're not just on certain sides of the city. Our school leaders and our teachers have been putting in the work, and our students are meeting the demands, and we want to find out what's happening. We've been utilizing IXL for several years now, and it is a platform for personalized learning. So thinking back to that differentiation, how can the teacher utilize tools like this, specifically in Algebra 1, to give more to students, supplement the curriculum, and also help students grow on these standards. And then shout out to the OST benchmarks. Those are in checkpoints. Those are incredible. What they are tools and pretty much retired assessment questions that teachers and school leaders can use. They're previous OST assessments that teachers can use in their classroom to see how students would be doing. And we've seen that school leaders that are using this, I know when I did a walk at Gallagher, I think Dr. Florence, you and I did that a couple of years ago. The principal there, Principal Bosley, no, not Gallagher, Garfield, yeah, wrong G. But yeah, Principal Bosley was like all into these OST checkpoints and using them and using it to really track the proficiency in data. And that is another school that is seeing gains and growth. So really just replicating these practice. Evidence that these shifts will work. The implementation of the cohesive supports at the high school that resulted in the gains that we saw. We saw that we have a streamlined curriculum in both Algebra 1 and Geometry, but really replicating those practices. Our high schools also use IXL quite a bit, and so when we see this growth, just seeing how they use that to really support that. And then we talked about the checkpoints that more of our schools can use. And with that, I'll pause. But before I turn it back to you, Chair Ellicott, see if there are questions. I would invite my colleagues to see if there's anything else you guys would add. Okay, all right.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Ms. Welch-Howell? Dr. Schroeder?
My light wasn't working, so I asked my colleague to.
Thanks for sharing over there.
Yeah, we share. Good evening. But first of all, my apologies for being late, but thank you so much for this detailed presentation. I want to go back to slides 9 and 11, talking about those 4th and 5th grade students. I just want to understand the cohorts a little more. First, the iReady assessment. So did I hear you say correctly that this is the first year that you've used the iReady assessment? So is there any kind of comparison data that looks at the iReady assessment and what would come from there from a calibration perspective to what was used in that same thing in that middle of that slide where you say 4th grade school year fall, right? So is there something to say, there's a certain measure that can show a correlation or something like that?
So since these are both nationally normed tests and aligned to the Ohio State test, it is the only data we have. We're comparing them to each other, knowing that they are two separate sets. We did have a cohort, we had a pilot of some schools using iReady last year, and we could see what we could pull. It wouldn't be statistically significant, but we can see what we can find there. But that's all we have.
No, that's helpful. So that means that I asked that question in the way that I did just to point out that there isn't just some kind of statistical difference and things like that. This is a drop.
Yeah.
It's not just a perceived drop. This is an actual drop, which means that we, the district, have to implement new strategies to think about how we can help this group of students get back on track.
Yes.
So that's a really good observation. So thank you for that. And then along similar lines, if you go to slides later, that drop, going from 34% in the third grade OST down to 31.7 in fourth grade fall is also a drop, because that in the previous cohort, that same difference of comparing at the end of third grade and the beginning of fourth grade, there was no drop, there was an actual increase. So this is also a drop. So I would, while the points that you make on this slide of saying there's additional students who would be able to sit for algebra in 2030, and that could increase our numbers and so on, this group also needs more strategic help to look at those things. And then one last point I'll make, and that's just that's not a question, that's just an observation. The question I have is, and you started to answer this a little bit on the next slide where you talked about strategies. So when you talk about that third bullet point, implementing data-driven instruction protocols, can you say a little more about that piece? When you say, that's a pretty broad statement, right? When you say data-driven instruction protocols and utilizing curriculum-based assessment results to adjust instruction. Are there examples that you can bring to us? Maybe not, maybe the next time we come back to the same measure of saying, here's what you saw in an assessment, here are the topics that are connected to a particular assessment. I'm not asking, about teaching to a test. I know that that's not what you mean, but like how it would be helpful for us to see what is the strategy behind developing professional development for teachers that is meaningful to teachers, that they see as helpful and is helpful to the students that are in front of them.
Yeah, no, all really great points. And one of the things we could do is, as we prepare for our goal, our ELA, maybe in a couple of slides we can share samples of our DDI protocol. So I do know that the team has really worked hard on what do these teacher-based teams look like, and also what progress monitoring looks like. And that looks different. The state has what are called RIMPs, which are reading improvement plans, that's for at the reading level. But now there are MIMPs, which are math improvement plans based on students who meet different proficiency levels. And so there is a requirement that the state has in terms of what progress monitoring looks like, and there's some protocols that our team has put in place while working with our labor partners to ensure that those are things that are done. But I can give you as a sample of that. Now, this is new. It's not, the sample we'll share is probably an ideal state or some of the things that we're doing. It's not at scale. So we have work to do. I think we just had a PD that we've started to do with teachers last week, but I don't know if that was in math or in ELA. Oh, that's Florence.
So DDI in and of itself, this is our second year of implementation. And so that is it is broad to say data-driven instruction protocols, but we've given schools a specific protocol to use that asks them to look at the strengths in the data, the areas of growth in the data, so where do we see students not performing well, and then how do we use that data to in turn decide what we reteach and how we reteach, what strategies will we use to reteach. And so it's very focused. This is our second year, as I said. Principals bring samples to our network meetings and go through them together and look at what's working well in classrooms across all schools so they can share best practices that way as well. Okay.
And I would just add to, while it's the second year in terms of doing that with school leaders, it is our first year doing it with teacher cohorts, so we are getting directly to the teacher, of which we've done 8th grade, which we do DDI with them as well. The feedback has been really good. And then we have Algebra 1 coming up next week. So we'll get to the teacher when it comes to these as well.
Thanks for the question.
Mr. Billups,
Thank you.
that's your light, right?
Yes,
Okay.
it's my light. So I got a couple questions. Number one, I wanted to go back to slide 5 just so that I make sure that I understand. When it looks at the percentage, currently at 35%, I believe we have 1 star on that number. How does the percentage correlate to stars? Is that clear information, or is that something that I missed?
No, it's not shared here, and there is clear information. So what you see, and this is a busy slide, but where it says ways to demonstrate post-secondary readiness as achieved by the states, these are one, I believe, of 11 ways that our students can show proficiency on this category, and all they need to do is one. And so what we find is in our schools, there are many different offerings. Some of our offerings aren't full pathways, or it doesn't give the full range of opportunities for students to actually demonstrate this proficiency, and also our attention to detail on making sure the students are actually being qualified in one of these areas. So it's a new measure in the state, but we've already been working very intentionally with our school leaders on this. And to your question, how it correlates to stars, it's not up here in terms of the rubric, but there, oh, Dr. D'Amico, it seems like you were you were already in there.
So to get to 2 stars, you need to be a 53% to 63%. 3 stars is 63 to 75. 4 is 75 to 85. 5 stars is 85% or higher. The state also has an element where if you improve by 15 percentage points in a single year, they will automatically give you 3 stars on the measure.
Thank you.
And without doing a spoiler alert of what we already see in 2025, because it's already a lagging measure, we had a lot of growth from 24 to 25. So even with this, and before we've done Building Brighter, we've had a lot of growth. And even with that growth, we're still going to be a little shy. So we have work to do, and Building Brighter will help with that.
And thank you for that. I just wanted to make sure that I fully understood that. I got a couple more questions. On slide number 12, one of the strategies was around common scope and sequence. Help me to understand, will that help for kids that's maybe transferring schools to stay on track in different situations like that?
Yes, we have a very high mobility district where students move from school to school. We also have a lot of students having chronic absenteeism is an issue. And in a system where students are moving in and out, sometimes are not coming to school as often, the things that we can help to control for to keep consistent across the board has helped. And so not only teaching the same material, but then also having the same pace in terms of what should be taking place in general in this day-to-day. Like it's not there are some flexibilities built in. We know that people have different schedules, or sometimes a teacher may be sick one day and they're not there. So there's some room built in, but we do want to make sure we're progressing forward. And I also know, like I said, I was a teacher in the classroom. Sometimes without a pacing guide helping you to move forward, you can get stuck where you're like, not all my students get this. So you teach the same lesson over and over and over again until you're like, okay, my students have gotten it. And there are so many standards, so much content to teach in a year. And so we want to help our teachers move through that content. Now, this is where we talk about that, those different tiers of levels, because sometimes when moving through the content, it is fast paced. And I remember there was a young lady last year at the State of the Schools last year. She was like, wow, this is fast paced. It feels like it's moving really fast. And so we should be pushing that pace for our students with that rigor. But if students do need to slow down, or there's different supplemental work we need to do, we want to provide that to them without needing to slow down the pace for all kids. So that's work that I know the team has been doing, pushing both that scope and sequence, as well as really thinking about the tiers.
Yeah. Thank you. I think I got maybe 1 or 2 more questions, Dr. Morgan. I'm just trying to think about, as we move through the next few school years, and we kind of touched on it a little bit here and there, but the number of our students who are able to take algebra in 8th grade, I just want to make sure that I fully understand. Are we expecting that number of students will increase? I know we mentioned kind of about 70 students. Will we expect that number to move?
So we're working hard on that, and I know many of you have been, actually all of you have been to a Building Brighter Futures presentation. A few challenges with that. One, right now our enrollment is really small in some of our elementary schools. So in some of our elementary schools, there are 20, 15 8th grade students. All of them may not qualify for Algebra 1. And so there's one teacher teaching teaching probably 8th grade and teaching all the content areas. And so even if there's 2 students or 3 students who are eligible for Algebra 1, there's not enough students to actually form an Algebra 1 class. And so the work we're doing through Building Brighter Futures, we talked about that healthy enrollment to give students a true middle school feel. I was blessed when I was in middle school to take Algebra 1, but in my 8th grade class, and I tell people this, that I was valedictorian in my 8th grade class, and they're like, oh, 8th grade was probably small, but we had 532 kids in my 8th grade class. We were a large middle school, and because of that, there was an honors cohort, and so I took geometry in my 9th grade year. I finished with calculus, and I took all of the honors classes because that was something that was available. We can't offer that right now. We don't, even if students who are moving a little bit faster, or even students who need additional support. There's sometimes students who aren't ready for Algebra 1 in 9th grade and may even need to take pre-algebra. So how do you differentiate those students out that need additional supports? When we're so small, we can't offer those differentiated supports. So Building Brighter Futures will help with it. Will it change overnight? Immediately, no. But we believe with healthy enrollment, we can help schedule it. And I sure hope we have more than 70 next school year.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to say, we mentioned kind of that added support for students, English language learners, and students with disabilities. That just kind of reminds me back to a couple weeks ago, the teacher who spoke about some of those challenges. So it was refreshing to read about the extra support for those students. But I also wanted to kind of touch on the teacher cohorts around implementing the bi-monthly Algebra 1 deep dive into the curriculum. Is that something that's going to help support the teachers in their ability to deliver the material in the classroom, like a support system for teachers?
Yeah, actually, I'll have someone from our academics team come up. And while they're coming up, before anyone, I gave the 532 in my 8th grade class. That is not the goal of Building Brighter Futures. Our goal, of course, in an entire elementary school is at least 450. But this point is, when you have more students, you can offer more. I just don't want people to think we're going to have, 8th grade classes of 532, if we can even find that many students in our city. So, Dr. Turner.
Yes, thank you for that question. Yes, the Algebra 1 teacher cohort will help to increase the teacher's capacity to understand the curriculum with their peers, right? Teachers understand the most when they're able to talk to each other and find best practices across schools, especially our schools that are 3.5 stars and above, right? So having them all in one space to be able to learn from each other and from the academics team will be helpful for them to be able to turnkey that information to go and help teachers then understand. So they do the deep dive curriculum and then also the DDI process. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Briggs, oh, sorry, Mr. Billups, are you done?
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Briggs?
Yeah, I was curious in the example that you gave, Dr. Morgan, where you have maybe 2 or 3 students who were eligible for algebra. Is there any way to take advantage of the online offerings that we have, like Khan Academy, or there may be others? I just know of that pretty well.
Great question, and those are some things we've looked at. And actually, there are some students who, in the past, that has been an avenue of which we've offered Algebra 1. I know when working with our Teachers Union president, Sherry Obrinsky, we know that the varying levels of support in the virtual environment. Virtual environment can be hit or miss, and so we have both talked about and agreed that a solution will not be at scale to say we're offering Algebra 1 to 8th grade students and it's all virtual. We know the levels of support that need to happen, and also just who is that person supporting that student when they're doing it virtual. Some students do great in that environment, some don't, and so we've looked into that. We've done some of those things before, but we're also looking at other solutions where we can provide some other supports. And you know, to that point though, on IXL, though it's not a tier 1 approach in terms of how we offer that as a course to students. Platforms like Algebra 1, I believe some of our schools may use Khan. Do we use Khan still? It's some for practice and different things. Those are elements and tools that teachers can use to help advance students and give them content, but not to replace a tier 1 or a teacher.
Ms. Peak?
Yes, I was going to ask something similar to that in the sense of leaving no child behind. What are some of the intervention methods? Is there tutoring? I know we do summer, things like that. So if you could just give a couple of examples of how we keep that momentum going, but just because a child may struggle, we can still provide some type of intervention and support.
Yeah, you know, different schools, there's different levels of intervention that takes place. There was a time, I know, post-pandemic where we had more of an organized tutoring. There was also resources and dollars through recovery dollars for that, to do that more at scale. But there are different things that I know our schools are doing. I don't know if there are a couple that you guys want to give nod to.
So we have the personalized learning pathways in all grades. In the K-8 space, we have that with iReady, and then in the high school space, they have that with IXL. And teachers have the ability to then pull reports on a specific cadence to be able to say what I need to reteach, what I need to go and do an intervention for, what do I need to go and do an extension for. So they have access to continuous data on their students to be able to pull them for small groups and differentiate those small groups based on the need. So that way they can reteach or provide interventions.
Wonderful, thank you.
And it's in the block for the schedule as well. So they have designated time to do that.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Great to hear that.
Dr. Morgan, I have a few things. First, wanted to build on what you said about board goals and sort of the need to obviously serve all students and all needs across the district. I did want to mention that the board goals, of course, are district goals, and that although you all have leaders, teachers are driving progress and improvement every day and looking to address all kinds of needs across the district, the idea is that we can't boil the ocean, and we can't, you know, if you focus on everything in a deep way, then you're not really focusing on everything. And so, you know, looking at this progress monitoring, especially for algebra, to me is really enlightening of, you know, why, looking at some of the reasons why maybe we haven't made progress. I did want to made the progress that we want to make. I did want to ask a quick clarifying question, maybe for Dr. Florence or Dr. Turner, around, was it that you said that the state test, the 35% of questions were about fractions? What was it?
This was on the iReady diagnostic, the test
Okay,
the
got
students
it.
just took at the beginning of the year.
And our assessment is that, so we've standardized the ELA curriculum, but we've been looking at the various math curriculums that we have across the district, which vary.
That's right.
And we've determined that only 8 schools have a curriculum that adequately addresses fractions.
No, so
Okay.
at the beginning of the year. So they
Okay.
take this test as soon as they walk in the door. So
Okay.
maybe they may have a week of school starting, and then they start
Okay.
the assessment. So they haven't taught it yet.
So
That is-
8 schools have, what was the 8
So
schools
8
thing?
schools have touched on fractions this early in
it.
the year. The rest of them, it will come as we
Okay,
progress
okay.
throughout the course of the year. But that early fractions is not taught in most curricula that early.
Got it. Okay, thank you. You know, I wanted to mention anecdotally something within my work at Minds Matter that we always notice with our students, which are all CMSD students, when they're working on the ACT, we tend to see especially low algebra or fraction knowledge or even awareness. So some of this, you know, progress monitoring is going to be incredibly impactful for the future. And then I wanted to ask, when you said that few students are eligible for Algebra 1, can you clarify what that means for everyone?
You know, there are many things we could look at when thinking about Algebra 1 and what would eligibility be. If we were taking some of those highest performers, so let's look at that cohort in 5th grade right now, and that's 17%. And particularly that 3 and maybe 1% that's in the blue and the dark blue. Those are high flyers. Like they are getting the standards. They understood those fractions even though it hasn't been taught. And I just wonder, those are kids sitting in a class that they're probably not challenged or bored. And how do we think about that group and how they're getting what they need? And going back to your point of when classes are so small, the teacher teaches, one group. And there's some kids that they may be fine when they are not challenged, but we also see that when students are not challenged, sometimes they start misbehaving. And there's a group, they're in 5th grade. Some of those high flyers may, if they're not being challenged in school, may find themselves in other things. And so it is really important to think about what that eligibility may look like to give them something more. But there are many ways we could define it. I know some districts have moved to like an Algebra 1 for all. We're not quite there yet, nor do we have the data that says that all students will be successful there. But when thinking about that eligibility, we do know that there's some high flyers that probably could qualify.
Is there, without getting too tactical, is there a strategy around other foundational math concepts in the earlier grades that would prepare students for Algebra 1 in 8th grade?
Yeah, we can look in that. I don't know if you guys have a response to that, but I think that's a really great question. Oh, go ahead, Erin.
Yeah, so some of that comes to looking at number sense routines, making sure that there's clear pathways for that. And then it goes to our second strategy around engaging students in cognitively demanding tasks. So making sure that when teachers are working with the curriculum, when we provide our suggestions, we're really hitting those questions that cause students to think. We have them participate in math discourse so that they're using the appropriate language and attacking problems in a way that raises their level of understanding. So to your point about fractions, like the joke I have is it's always fractions, right? So when you hit that 4th grade to 5th grade pattern, how are you using fractions in a word problem? How are you making sure that at the beginning you give them manipulative so that they can physically touch it, so that they can move from that concrete understanding to the conceptual understanding? So really helping them make that progress, so that by the time they hit 7th grade, we can do a compacted curriculum so that in 8th grade, they can then take Algebra 1. So that's kind of like our goal as we move forward in mathematics. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Dr. Morgan.
Thank you.
Is there any old business? All right, I have new business. I'd like to wish a happy birthday to Mr. Billups, Dr. Sridhar, and Ms. Welch-Howell, all of who have October birthdays. Happy birthday. All right, as you know, we are here on the east side, and the next regular board meeting will be a board business meeting on Tuesday, October 28th at 6:30 p.m. at Garrett Morgan High School. The chair will now entertain a motion to adjourn this board work session.
So moved.
Second.
Hearing no objection, this meeting is adjourned. Have a good night.